I don't want to have to be strong right now. I don't want to have to figure it out. What if I don't want to be the one who's got the answer, the person who's got the problem solved? What really is the sacrifice that is required to truly be ambitious? Your identity is shifting and growing so fast that you sometimes look back and you don't really know who you are. I feel like I have like 8 versions of me. I have sometimes felt like I'm too big for some rooms, but also in moments that I've felt like I'm not enough. Who am I to want those things? We see problems differently. We see ambition differently. We see work ethic differently. I've sacrificed time. I've sacrificed relationships. I have sacrificed so many things and I wouldn't change it. The only other option that I see is to know what was possible to achieve and never go for it. Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. Today, we are going to be talking about just that, what it means to be ambitious, and with that, the true sacrifice of what is required if you are somebody who has deep ambition and drive, not even just necessarily in your business, but in your life. I will tell you, one of the things that I know from all of the clients that I have the absolute pleasure of working with, all the incredible women that listen to this podcast, who reach out to me in the DMs. One of the things that I will tell you is a common denominator amongst every single person is that they are going for big things in every bucket. You have aspirations of an incredible marriage. You have aspirations of being an amazing mom. You have aspirations potentially of being at like peak health. Maybe for you, it's a health or a fitness goal. It could even be that you have aspirations of things that you just like want to achieve, impact that you want to create, a mark that you want to leave on the world. And you kind of feel that you have this itch inside of you. You have this calling, you have this knowing, this intuition that you are meant for something big. But what a lot of people, when they have that feeling, don't often get opportunities to talk about and often don't have spaces to really be heard, is if you have the desire to not be like the many, to not be like the masses, most people don't have opportunities to talk about what's actually required of you and what is the sacrifice that you're making to truly be part of the 2% that have that kind of life. And I've been thinking about this recently because I sometimes find that I struggle to resonate with the everyday kind of programming that we've been given, which is that, there's kind of this aspect of being done. That's how I feel like for some conversations that I listen to or some conversations that I'm part of, is there's in some spaces this complacency. There's this aspect of, I don't need to go for more. This is enough. I don't need to push because I'm married. Like this is the finish line. And I've recently, just in a variety of buckets, not even just in business, I've seen situations where people settle. And I asked myself, okay, so what really is the difference between the people who settle and the people who achieve? And again, this can be in any bucket. It doesn't have to be in business. But if you want to have like the biggest, boldest, most beautiful, vibrant, incredibly full life, and you feel like you have this big, bold vision that you're holding space for, what is the thing that you may have to fully make a relationship with or fully give peace to giving up? Meaning, what are the sacrifices that if you are truly ambitious will have to be something that you are okay with in order to be able to achieve? And so I was listening to a podcast actually that said, ambition for most people who are successful, they ultimately sacrifice in the short term. Whereas for those that are typically not as successful in their aspirations, it's because they are okay with sacrificing in the long term. And that landed for me because I realized that, for example, getting out of bed early is a sacrifice. Going to the gym when you don't feel like it is a sacrifice. Being the person who works when you kind of don't feel like working today, that is a sacrifice. And so there's 2 decisions we have in those moments. We have those moments where we can say, you know what, I just don't have capacity for this right now. I just don't feel like doing it. And you can say, I'm not going to go to the gym and I'm not going to eat healthy, or I'm not going to work on my business today. I'm not going to put up marketing. But that in the moment is us saying, okay, like I'm just going to compromise in this short situation or scenario. But we oftentimes don't recognize what that does for us when it compounds over time and what life that truly creates for us. On the contrast, if you're in those moments when you don't want to do something and you're in those moments where you don't want to take action and you do anyway, those also compound. That time you don't want to go to the gym and you do. The time you don't want to eat healthy and you do. The time you kind of are like, oh, I don't feel like doing a date night, but you push yourself because you know that that will be something that's going to support your relationship this week. Those little tiny moments that we choose to sacrifice in a certain time, or it could be in time, it could be in energy, it could be in money, whatever it may be. When we make those sacrifices, think about how those compound. They compound into, a healthy meal when you didn't feel like it and another healthy meal when you didn't feel like it, compounds into you being healthier. Going to the gym when you didn't feel like it and then going again when you don't feel like it, compounds into you being more fit. So I started to get thinking about what really is the sacrifice that is required to truly be ambitious. And I also think it's an important thing to talk about because we see a lot of women who are crushing online. There's so many people online who are talking about, this big financial milestone. It could be a business milestone, could be, even relationship milestones, right? It could be kids, for example. And I don't think enough people talk about what is required as a sacrifice to be able to achieve that. Like, what does it mean to be able to be a mom and a business owner? What sacrifice is required? If you are someone who is saying, hey, I want to build like an 8-figure business, what is required? What will you be sacrificing to do so? So I don't think it's talked about. And I think because of that, sometimes we can feel very alone in what we're experiencing because you may feel like there's times where you have to work and you don't go to the family function, or a friend asks you to say, hey, let's do lunch at 2 p.m. And you're like, well, I'm kind of in the weeds of work right now. I don't really have time to go at 2 p.m. or it doesn't support me to go at 2 p.m. And you feel like, is there something wrong with me? Is there something wrong with the way that I'm doing things? Is there something wrong with the way that I'm operating myself or my business? And because that, it can feel very heavy. And I think that oftentimes we are not having the conversations that we need to. And so I hope today to really, more than anything, have you walk away with feeling so incredibly validated that if you are experiencing any of these things, this is something that frankly is just the cost of being an ambitious woman. So first, I want to talk a little bit about identity, because this is something that I feel like was kind of the core, sacrifice. I think many of us think with entrepreneurship, the sacrifice is time. Like you have these classic visions of, people working weekends and they're like 4 a.m. on their laptop with these like bloodshot eyes trying to get through the day, drinking endless coffee. Like oftentimes we see a lot of, marketing media that really speaks to the time sacrifice that is required. And that is definitely a thing. But I think the thing that we don't have enough conversations about is that when you develop as an entrepreneur, when you go for bigger and bigger goals and you are achieving more and more things, you're changing, you're developing, you're changing the way of which you operate. And part of that is that your identity evolves and your perspective evolves. And so with this, one of the things that oftentimes will happen is that sometimes you're going to feel like you are too successful, too much, too big of a personality, too ambitious sometimes to be around the people you're around. And I had a conversation even at a retreat recently, and someone shared with me that they're from a very small town. And they said, when I go, out to coffee with my friends who live locally, I feel like an oddball. Like I feel like I don't want to have certain conversations. I don't want to share certain things because I don't feel like people are going to get me. And I feel almost like too big for the rooms that I'm in, too intense maybe for the rooms that I'm in. And on the contrast, even for me, I have sometimes felt like I'm too big for some rooms, but also in moments that I've felt like I'm not enough to be in other rooms. So there's always this kind of identity evolution where we're trying to find our footing, because in entrepreneurship, you're growing so much, not even just in a business level, but on a personal development level. You are expanding and growing so much. And to try to keep your circle up to date with how much you're growing is a real task. It's difficult to do. So you kind of feel like you're never really necessarily fitting. And honestly, part of that is exhausting because you feel like you're constantly reinventing yourself. Like if I think back to like server me, I don't understand her anymore really. Like at the time, like I get why my perspective was what it was and why I had the behaviors that I did. But now when I think about it, I'm like, I couldn't go for drinks with her necessarily, I doubt anymore, because we just see the world such a different way. We see problems differently. We see, ambition differently. We see work ethic differently. Like we have very different perspectives of life. And so I wonder, with just what my perspective was at that time, could I resonate with her? And so I've had conversations with people who say, like, I just feel misunderstood. I feel like nobody gets me. Like, I don't know that the people I used to hang out with really understand who I am. And potentially that they're not comfortable or supportive in you growing as much as you are, or that they're not supportive in how fast you're going. Like, if someone says to you, like, oh, like so and so has changed. And I think that that's such an interesting comment to say to someone, "Oh, so and so has changed." Because my answer would be, "Isn't that the whole freaking point? Like, isn't that the point that I have evolved and I've grown and I've expanded into the next level of my life?" And that's where I think this thought of, life being static. So many of us are okay with like, this is who I am, this is how I am, and I'm never planning on growing or changing. And for me, I just never could make peace with that. And so I remember that, I had friend groups that I used to hang out with all the time. Like they were people that I would spend a lot of time with. But I felt like as I grew within myself, not even necessarily financially, but just in myself, that I grew in realizing like, my life is under my control, meaning I can control my efforts, I can control my inputs each day. That, affects my outputs. There were people who were just like, this is who I am. Like this is as much as I'm going to get out of my life. And I never understood that because I thought, well, no, that will be the case if you allow it to be. Granted, a lot of us have resistances. There are very real culture and social factors that can add massive resistance to someone being successful or achieving things. But we have to realize that we have the opportunity to start saying, okay, well, what can I control? In a world where things are going to happen, what is truly within my control of what I can navigate myself? And as a result, when I started to hang around those people more and more, I just became less stimulated by the conversations. I became less interested in the dialogue that life was happening to us instead of us kind of taking charge and holding the steering wheel and saying, "Hey, this is where I want to go." And over time, what I realized is if I kept staying inside of these experiences and inside these conversations, I too was going to start to believe that that was truly what life was. Oh, well, this is always what happens to me, or this is just another, crazy day in my reality. And I thought, I don't subscribe to that. So part of me thought, okay, I got to get out of these conversations. Like I got to get around better, more stimulating, perspectives and values and things like that. But also there's like a grief with that because the sacrifice of that is that sometimes if you're not around those people, part of your identity changes because you're like, these have always been my people. And there's a sadness with that because you realize that these used to be conversations that really stimulated you and they used to be things that you really enjoyed. But there's a grieving that the places you used to feel so comfortable are actually now the most uncomfortable place for you to be. And I think that's something that a lot of us don't talk about is the fact that part of sometimes creating the new you also requires you to kill the old you or to at least be intentional about where that part of you fits in today's world. I also think this came up with identity around hiding success because I think one of the experiences I had, and I know that many of my peers have had, is that when you have, successes, you sometimes don't feel comfortable to share them. Like even now, I have amazing women around me who are just achieving these incredible milestones. And they'll message me like privately about this, and they'll kind of be hush hush about what they're achieving. And I said, hey, you have $1 million business, or hey, you have a $3 million business. Why are we whispering about this? Like, why are we whispering about this? This makes no sense. And that's because they feel that in the places that they are or the people that they're around, they're terrified to step into the identity of success because it means that they will not anymore be comfortable potentially in the circles that they're in. Now, granted, all of this is conditional upon the people that you're around. I don't want to demonize and say that, older friends who knew you prior to this cannot be your friends. That is not what I'm saying at all. What I mean is there's a discomfort sometimes in actually truly embracing the identity of who you've become, because in doing so, it would make the people around you uncomfortable. And I think as well, when you step into this identity, like even for me, when I stepped into the true identity and kind of owning that I was an entrepreneur or owning that I was going to be a business owner, as soon as I took on the label of like, I have a business, I felt so much pressure versus like, oh, Kate's posting on Instagram didn't feel like as much pressure or intensity. But when you say like, I have a business or like, I have a team, there starts to become this innate pressure of maintenance. And like, now the world knows that I'm doing this. Now the world knows that this is my vision or this is my goal. And now I feel immense pressure that I got to make this happen. I got to make this successful. And so oftentimes there's indirectly this pressure to be on. There's this pressure to figure it out. There's this pressure to now that you've said you're going to do this, go do it. And there's a natural pressure that's associated with establishing those goals. And so when we see these reps of us having success, or if we see people around us see that we are achieving things and we are, knocking out these goals, what I also find is there's this unspoken belief that you are so capable. Like if you've ever heard somebody to you say, oh my God, like she just does so much. She's always crushing one goal after another. She has so much capacity. She manages a lot in a day or week. Like she's go, go, go. She gets, business done. She handles things. She takes care of business. Those are all really incredible and supportive compliments. But here's the other thing that I also know. Those same women, just like you, who are getting those compliments, who are, the people who are telling you that you are so capable and you can do so much and you manage so much, you're like, yeah, I do. And you believe in yourself and you know that you do. But I would hazard to guess that you also feel like just as much as you are capable, you are also internally feeling very stretched thin. And I know for me, there's been a lot of labels of like, oh, hey, Kate can handle this level of stress, or Kate can handle this level of management of things. And I can, but oftentimes because people might believe that you're capable, they don't understand that you too have a limit to your capacities. Just because you handle things well and you juggle things well doesn't mean that that doesn't have an impact on you. And oftentimes I see for ambitious women like you, when you handle a lot, people also have this unspoken expectation of you to constantly handle that. And so I find sometimes there's a little bit less of a consideration over time of just how human you are, which is that, yes, while you can and you do manage and handle a lot, it doesn't mean that that doesn't come with a cost, meaning that you managing all of that, you're not sacrificing in some way. And so with this, the identity piece that I would say is the most common across the board with all of my clients is that there is this aspect of you don't recognize yourself. And someone shared this with me literally just this week. We've been working together now for about 7 months. And she said, Kate, I just don't even recognize the me that started this program. I don't even recognize her. And while part of that is like aspirational and exciting and, incredible to be able to grow and expand yourself, your skills, your perspective so much in like 6 to 7 months, that's beautiful. It's also a little bit jarring because you realize that your identity is shifting and growing so fast that you sometimes look back and you don't really know who you are. And even for me, I feel like when I became an entrepreneur, the past me felt like she died because I don't understand her anymore. I don't really resonate with her anymore. And even I would say, they often talk about like these kind of like internal rebirths, if you will, not to get woo woo about it, but they talk about rebirths. And so even for me, I feel like my, identity and my personality also did a very massive shift about just around under 2 years ago. And even that, I look at, what I call Blazer Kate, which is basically like the most in her masculine energy, burnt out, pushing constantly, candle burning at both ends, emotionally detached from myself. And I just feel like even looking at her to who I am now, which is like literally just 2 years ago, I don't understand her the way that I used to. Like that used to in the moment, that felt so me. Like that was who I was. That's how I showed up. That was the identity that I was like, this is who I am. And now I literally look even at past photo shoots. I look at past, calls, like just trainings even of how I showed up and how I communicated. And I just don't understand her anymore. Like I realize and I see the disconnection within her from an emotional level of like just not really, really knowing and understanding herself. And now that I feel like I have done that work, I don't resonate with her anymore. I feel like I don't understand her. And so it's hard because sometimes it's difficult to look back and feel like I have like 8 versions of me, and you don't in that always have a stability of who I am. You're in this constant kind of reincarnation, if you will, this reinvention of your identity and personality. So I think that when we talk about this constant pursuit of growth and this constant achievement, it's so sexy. It's so exciting to be like, yes, I'm achieving these new milestones and these new goals. But you really have to switch your identity in the process. And I don't think people talk about that. The last thing I want to say around the identity bucket is I actually had a client who mentioned this to me on a call this week. And she said, Kate, one of the things that really showed me my identity growth was I had a situation where I was so burnt out. I had just like no energy left, no capacity left. And she said I was so busy. And so I remember considering hiring someone to clean my house because I was just like burning candle at both ends. I had no capacity. And her mom said to her, she said, did I not teach you how to clean your house? Like, why would you hire someone to clean your house? And she, in the moment, said, it challenged everything about my identity and how I grew up because I had never grown up knowing people cleaning your house. She came from a family and a culture where you never had people clean your house. Like you always cleaned your house yourself. And so I shared with her that I had the same thing because I came from a similar background where like my family, my mom never had anybody to help her around the house. She did everything herself. She painted the house herself. She cleaned the house herself. Like she was a one woman show. She did it all. And so I remember even for me, I had a similar circumstance where I was just so busy and so drained that I was like, I don't have time to clean. I really need help and support. And I hired someone to help me with cleaning each week. And that was stretchy for me because my identity was like, I'm not this person. I'm not, this, my mind kind of went to like, I'm not this bougie. I'm not this rich. I'm not this person who has people clean her house. Like that's just, I'm not that person because I had such a perspective of who that was. And what I realized was like, I had these values, I had these perspectives, this identity that I was latching onto of like, I can't do that because that makes me a different person. And so it caused me to do a lot of work on who am I and what parts of me do I have to let go of to be able to step into that next level of success. But it's hard because sometimes you just don't recognize yourself. And so, there really is a massive, massive identity sacrifice in the circles you're around, with yourself, with your values, with your perspective, with your decisions. But there's also this aspect of emotional weight. There's an emotional, invisible weight that many ambitious women carry. One of them is that oftentimes when you are someone, like I said, who's very capable, you're also very emotionally capable. And so, what it typically looks like is that you can oftentimes become the go to resource for a lot of people. So, you will become the person that is like crisis manager for everybody around you. And I've had women say this to me. I feel like all my friends, my family, like they bring things to me, and part of that is likely because you have such a high capacity to hold for other people. You have most likely probably pretty high empathy. You have a lot of capacity probably for stress and for stimuli. You have a lot that you've managed and handled. So when people see someone who has this strength and this capability, the first inclination is I'm going to give my stuff to her because she can handle it and she's a resource for me. And while that's beautiful, there's also a sacrifice to that because there's the impact of the fact you are emotionally carrying for a lot of people. And so while it's amazing that you have that skill, it's also difficult because that skill comes with an emotional kind of like backpack full of weights that you're carrying because you have that skill set. I also think that oftentimes when you are so put together and you are handling things and you're making things happen, many of us don't allow ourselves permission to fall apart. And this is something that a lot of women I talk to experience, and you may resonate with this, which is like, especially for the breadwinner, but even if you're not, when you have so much that you handle and you're responsible for, maybe it's a family, maybe it's, your relationship, your marriage, your team, your clients. There's many women I talk to that don't feel like there's even an option for them to not be okay. They're like, if I have a day off, if I have a week where I am off my game, like I just feel guilty. I don't have the capacity to not be okay. Like I'm not in a place where not being okay would be okay. And I think that that creates a lot of pressure on you. You may feel like if you're not on, the whole thing will fall apart. And think about the emotional, the mental pressure that that creates. That if you break in any way, the whole thing breaks. And so while many of us, we push through and we kind of pull ourselves up and we say, okay, great, we're just going to kind of bulldoze through the problem, there is an impact that that has because you carry that with you every day. Whether you acknowledge it or not, you understand that you are a lot of the core of this machine. And that, if you even moms know this when they are, sick or they're having the flu, it's like you don't get a day off as a mom. Your kids are still in your bedroom at 6 a.m. like, hey, let's go. And you're like, I want to barf right now. But like your kids, obviously we always hope for an amazing partner who can take over. But even moms are a classic example of like, even when you're not okay, it's so hard to not be okay because there's still kind of this unspoken expectation that you have to be okay enough to be able to show up that day. And I think that oftentimes when we don't talk about this, when we don't have these conversations, it can oftentimes lead to feelings of frustration, overwhelm, resentment. And with this, there's often a resentment of so many people rely and lean on you. And this feeling of frustration of like, well, who do I get to lean on? Who do I get to give all my tasks to? Who do I get to give, you know, being a full-time mom to today? Who do I get to give this responsibility to? And even this is something that I, have said to my family before. I've said, I am always the person that's like, I got this, I got this, I got this. Like, I trust myself on such a deep, deep, deep level. But I also have had so many breakdowns where I just end up being like, I don't want to have to be strong right now. I don't want to have to figure it out. I don't want to have to be the person who's got this. Like, I just want someone to take the weight away. And that weight can be, your family, like taking the responsibilities of your family today off your plate. It can be the weight of being the CEO, the one with all the answers. It can be the weight of being the person who's the face of marketing. It can show up in so many flavors, but think about how much you hold. You are holding, I got this, I got this, I got this. And sometimes it can create this really under the surface resentment and frustration of like, but what if I don't want to have it today? What if I don't want to be the one who's got the answer, the person who's got the problem solved? And I've said, I'm okay, I'm okay. But what about if I just don't want to be okay today? Like, I need space to not be okay. And many of us as women, regardless of the flavor of how that shows up for you, really struggle to do that. And that's because we often hold ourselves to such a high standard with our health, with our, family, with our relationships, with our business. And so oftentimes I even witness that pressure isn't even always necessarily that other people are putting it on us, but we are putting it on ourselves. And I see this when maybe you are wanting to take a day off, but then when you take that day off, you kind of feel guilty for taking the day off because you're like, there's so much that needs to get done. Like, there's laundry to do, there's a house to clean, there's work that needs to be done. There's things to do. And you think, like, I gotta go, I gotta take action, I gotta make things happen. But it doesn't undo the fact that you also yourself need to have the ability to not be on. You cannot be on all the time. And there's a sacrifice that comes with being on all the time. It's that you can lead to burnout, it can lead to resentment, it can lead to overwhelm. That is not something anybody necessarily needs to be holding. And with this, then when we hit these moments of frustration, when we hit these times where we feel like I'm always the one who's got to do it and I'm always the one who has to handle it, there's part of it as well that then ends up being, well, people say, don't do it. Like, just don't go for it. Don't go try to be this person. Don't go try to achieve this thing. Play small. And that, as I say that, probably creates frustration in you. You're like, I don't want to play small. And even this has been said to me because I'll say, okay, I got to handle this. I got to go to the gym. I'm in the process right now of starting a second business. And so I'm trying to do that, obviously navigate our existing business and manage that. House renovation happening right now. There's a lot going on. And so the natural advice that I will get when someone around me is not necessarily ambitious is like, just chill. Like, just don't go to the gym or just don't go get your steps today. Or, you don't need to do XYZ. It's like compromise, remove stuff and just keep it small and safe. And I always have struggled because my ambition sometimes does lead me to burnout. It sometimes has led me to resentment and overwhelm and frustration. And then in those moments when I vent to people around me, I can be met with, then don't be ambitious as the basic theme that I get. Don't go for those things. Don't look to achieve. Because if you don't do that, then you wouldn't have this problem. And so there comes this guilt sometimes in wanting more. There becomes this guilt in, well, why is everybody else okay with X? And I feel like I want to double that. Or why is everyone else okay with, let's just say not working out, but then I feel like I want to work out 3-4 times a week. Why is everybody else okay with this kind of relationship when I feel like I want like a vibrant, connected, deep, X relationship, and I feel like my girlfriends are not in those relationships or something. Again, the flavor can change depending on what you yourself are navigating. But there can sometimes be this guilt that we have as women for wanting more. Like, why can't you just be content? Why can't you just be okay with where you are? You don't need more in whatever bucket. And so when you have these thoughts of more, it can come with sometimes a doubt of like, okay, why do I want more? Why am I not content? And even for me, I have felt, who am I to desire these things? Like, if I think about my future self, I'm 33 today, and I think about me at 45. I have a very clear vision of what I want my life to look like. I have a very clear vision of what I desire for myself, for my relationship, for my family. And with that, I sometimes wonder, like, who am I to want those things, right? Many of us associate some of the most successful people in society to be like the 2%. And sometimes people associate them as people that got lucky. But when we think or we see these lives or we see these realities and we think like, I want that, or like I desire to achieve that, some of us don't believe that we deserve it. Some of us don't believe that that's possible for us. So in those moments where you're ambitious and you're having these achievements and you have these goals and visions, there can be a moment of, who am I to say that I want that? Who am I to say that I want to have this big house? Who am I to say I want to have a $3 million business? Who am I to say that I want to be a marathon runner and a business owner? Like, am I too much? Like, is this something that I should feel confident or okay about wanting and desiring? And as part of that pursuit of those things, sometimes there's a guilt that you're going to have to do it alone. There's such a guilt. I was even talking to my sister about this last week of sometimes if you upgrade your life so much, or if you upgrade, your house or your income or your lifestyle or whatever it may be, will you, as a result, not resonate, or will the people around you not connect with you anymore? Right? So, like, all of us know those people who made a lot of money and have a lot of, potentially accolades and achievements and possessions. And as soon as they did, we kind of felt like, I don't resonate with Sarah anymore because she's in her own world over there. Sometimes the sacrifice of achieving is that you feel like you have to go alone. And that reality of like not resonating with people around you is partially a choice, right? So like there is the possibility of being very successful and also being very grounded. I want to be clear on that. But there is sometimes, let's just say, okay, you're someone who wants to train for an Ironman, or you want to train for a marathon and none of your friends are runners, and you're prioritizing your training, Monday through Friday. And that's a really big priority and something significant for you. Sometimes there's a guilt of like, I don't get to enjoy this with people because this is just something that I have as a goal. I feel like I'm kind of alone in this pursuit of what I want for my health. And so with this, I even had a different conversation with someone else who said that she was talking about this in reference to her marriage, because she said, I feel sometimes like I'm very happy with my husband. I'm very happy with my relationship. We're literally so connected and it's only getting better and better as time goes on. But she said, then I sometimes go to these dinners and women are talking about like, ugh, my husband this, or like, you won't believe what he did this week, or like, I can't believe like men this and men that. And she said, I just don't resonate. And so sometimes I feel so lonely because I have nothing to contribute to those conversations. I will not speak poorly about my husband. And so she said, I feel like I'm really lonely in my marriage because I realized there is a culture of people who talk and complain about their relationships. And I don't see us that way. And I would never do that. And I don't see any problems we have as complaining. There are opportunities for us to, get coaching or to evolve. And so this really does show up in a variety of buckets. It doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether it's, business or in your relationship, whatever it may be. There is definitely an impact on us when we feel like we want to go for things, but we don't necessarily always have someone to take with us on that journey or on that pursuit. And so there's a lot of both obvious sacrifices we make, but there's also the more subtle ones that we navigate sometimes on our own that nobody around us is even privy to. And there's also trade-offs, okay? So one of the trade-offs that I remember was the first indication of like, okay, whoa, this is interesting, is I remember saying that I was in the beginning of my business and I hadn't hit like even six figures at that point. And I remember saying to my coach, like, oh yeah, like I'm just like, oh, I'm working weekends. And he said, okay. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, and you're starting a business. He's like, I wouldn't be shocked if you work mornings, days, nights, and weekends, because if you're going for something big, you're going to do something that most people don't do. So I remember one of the sacrifices is just having time for joy. And it was only once it was like a year and a bit, probably like 18 months or so down the road, that I had a conversation with him and he said, when was the last time you experienced joy? And I remember saying, like, I honestly don't know, because so much of my life had been revolving around work and about creation and about putting in hours. And I realized that there was a season that I did have to sacrifice joy. I did have to sacrifice the fun stuff, like, people calling each week, let's go for dinner here, let's go for drinks here, family events that would sometimes fall on like the busy season of something that I was doing or in the middle of a launch. It'd be like, hey, let's take the whole family, let's go out for 6 hours. I'm like, can't do that. Like, not happening today. And I remember there's a lot of things that I couldn't participate in and that I couldn't do. And I lost out on for sure, like a lot of, family dinners or celebrations or things like that. But that's also just par for the course of what was required for me to do things, especially in the speed that I wanted to. Because I think speed and the loftiness of the goal you have is also something that is very relevant. Because if you have a goal, it's not just a matter of having a goal, but also what is that goal and how fast you want to achieve it. When I started my business, I wanted to hit 7 figures. And so because of that, I knew that it was going to require me to show up in a very specific way. And I sacrificed a lot in order to be able to achieve that in the timeline I did. Now, looking back, I probably could have achieved that in a more stretched out timeline and not have been so stressed. But it is something that even today I'm very thankful for that I was able to do, but it did take a lot. And so I remember realizing that I did give up many years of joy, of just like entertainment and like connection and fun and play. I did give those up because that at the time is what was required for me to do the things that I wanted to do. The other thing I know is that there's many women around me that in the pursuit of the things that they want have lost hobbies. They've lost routines that once grounded them. I had a conversation with someone the other day and I said, what was something that used to bring you a lot of joy? And she said, going to yoga. And I said, when was the last time you went to yoga? And she's like, oh gosh, like not, months ago kind of thing. And so I think many of us, we do in the pursuit sometimes of achieve and of accomplish, we lose ourselves. And it's happened to me. I had seasons where I'm like, I don't even think I have a hobby, truthfully. Now I do. But at the time, I was so fully committed to this goal, fully committed to achieving and to hitting the goals that I was looking for that I just didn't really allow myself to have space for hobbies. And so it was something that I think now when someone has a scaling business, they can integrate. But sometimes when you're building, you do have to give up on the classic routines that you once had or the hobbies you had to be able to achieve the things that you want. And the thing I know about you is that you most likely achieve milestones and you never celebrate. This is the other thing is like many of us, we don't give ourselves in ambition and in the things we want to achieve moments to just be like, wow, like you did that. You did that, big or small. And this is not again about financial. It can even just be the fact that you're a mom and you're a business owner. Let's just take a second to think about what you're navigating because that is so much for you to hold. And many of us sacrifice any validation, any acknowledgement. We put our head down and we go to the next milestone and the next goal, and we're knocking that out and then we're on this goal. And it's like, let's just take a second to realize what you've achieved. You've achieved X financial milestone. You've achieved potentially, growing a business when no one in your family was an entrepreneur. You've achieved building a business while being a mom. You've achieved potentially having multiple businesses. Like there are things that you are doing, but you are sacrificing validation. You are sacrificing acknowledgement in the pursuit of just the next thing, the next milestone. And I see it all the time because most ambitious women that I know are not particularly great at celebrating themselves. And that's because they believe that they're just really, this is just what I do. This is just how I handle things. And they're on to the next thing. And as a result of this, most ambitious women, probably like yourself, are very independent. You handle things. You feel like sometimes asking other people to help you is harder than you just doing it yourself. So you handle things. You take care of business. And again, sometimes the sacrifice of that is we don't get the help that we need. We don't get the help we deserve. And we are so independent, so effective, so productive and efficient that we handle things or are making it happen. Yes, but to what cost? To what cost are you handling it yourself and making it happen yourself? And it's something that I see all the time is that many people that I support or that I work with are just used to being the one who's got it handled or solves the problem. And so it's a weight that many of us don't acknowledge that we bring with us. Now, there's more logistical sacrifices, which are probably the most common that we hear about, which is number one, your time does not fully belong to you. This is something, especially in the building phase of a business, and for some people in scaling too, your time is not actually yours, meaning, your schedule is probably built around your launches, potentially clients, your team's needs, deadlines that are due. There's a natural accommodation that happens with our schedule to say, there's what I want for sure, but what I want doesn't always match what the business needs. And so because of that, we have to say, okay, well, how can we accommodate? So there's sacrifices with our schedule that are required to support the business and what the business needs. And one of the things that also I know happens a lot with women in business is what is called free days, which is many of us will have like a free day in business, but often that day is not actually free. You have an off day, meaning you're not maybe client facing or you're not interacting with clients, but by no means is that day free or off because you are managing things and handling things the entire time. And so with that, the off time oftentimes is never even off. I even went this morning and I got my nails done and I talked to the nail tech who's the owner of the place. And we were talking about entrepreneurship. And she said, like, it just never stops. She's had that salon now for 11, 12 years. And she said, like, I work 7 days a week. If I'm not here working about on something or like on actual nails, I'm at home doing the books. I'm thinking about marketing. I'm getting into ads now. Like, you're just always on. So there's this sacrifice as well of your time and of your focus, which is that you're never really truly getting oftentimes the ability to truly turn off. And this is what we see with vacations. Many entrepreneurs, when they go on vacation, are often kind of like, I'm just going to quickly check my email. I'm going to quickly check Slack. I'm going to quickly check in here because the idea of completely disconnecting and being off is not something that many of us have. We have the ability to do it, but it is difficult, is what I should say. So very rarely when people go on vacation, are they truly like on vacation? Their brain might think about work and like ideas for work, or they're genuinely checking their phone, which is also connected to work. So we also see this in energy. Okay. So I really see that a lot of business owners are looking at their energy like money, like literally like a currency. And that is, you are constantly having to triage your life to say, okay, I have X amount of battery today. Where am I going to put that? Because this needs my attention. That needs my attention. And it's not just in business. It can be life as well. You've got client deliverables, but the kids have soccer, but then you have to go, get this gift for the birthday party on Saturday, but then you're trying to make sure because your mom's coming into town and she wants it. Like, you're just, okay, I've got 80% battery. How are we using this? And you're constantly triaging. And sometimes from an energetic perspective, what it means is that when all is said and done and when all has been taken care of and everything's been achieved and accomplished, there's a tendency for you to put yourself last. And I see this because oftentimes you may make plans and you'll make like social engagements, you'll make social commitments. And then when the time comes for you to go do those, you go, okay, well, at the time when I made that social commitment, my battery was at 90 and now my battery is at 12%. So I am trying to figure out the middle, which is how do I kind of find a baseline here? Because I don't want to go to these social commitments because I don't have the bandwidth anymore. And oftentimes, as a result, we lean into what is the most productive, what's the most efficient, but not always what's actually the best for us, right? There's so many times where we are doing things, we're making decisions from a logical brain of what makes most sense, but it often means 9 times out of 10 that our personal life is somehow in the process going to take a hit if we're not careful. Now, again, when you're scaling a business, this may not be always the case. The goal is for sure when you're scaling a business to get it to a place where you don't have to sacrifice your entire life in order to scale. But there's a natural building that's required to get to that place. And I think that trying to achieve that at the starting point is very, very difficult for most people. The thing I also would say happens is that if we're not careful, business can feel like it comes first. And while our businesses sometimes are flexible, they're too flexible that they can sometimes eat into the things that are actually important. One of the common denominators I see with every single scaling entrepreneur is that their meetings, for example, they'll say, I'm on back-to-back meetings and I had no time to even like run to the washroom. And I thought, you navigate your schedule. What's going on here? And when we look at the schedule, we realize that They were just so flexible of, yes, I can take that call, and yes, I can be on that podcast, and yes, I can do this training. They're so flexible. They're so open that openness ultimately is a hindrance because it ate into their lunch so much so they didn't have one. And so it is something that I encourage people to look at is, are you sacrificing in being flexible with your schedule, being so flexible, in fact, that it's something that ultimately takes away from your experience of your personal life or your day-to-day life. And another one is also sleep. I was guilty of this, which is that I had a time in my business where I really didn't prioritize sleep. I really didn't focus on that as something that was a needle mover for me. And I thought, okay, well, I can, just sleep in tomorrow, or I can just, go to bed a little bit later tonight. And I was so flexible with I make my own schedule that I really didn't realize how, me adjusting and adapting my schedule constantly was actually something that was creating constant inconsistency, and it was impacting me. I was sacrificing some good quality sleep as a result of not having any consistency in that bucket. And most importantly, I find is that you sometimes will lack the ability you sacrifice spontaneity, is how I would describe it. You can't just, pop out and do X and just do this X thing because it's fun. You're looking at, okay, well, what do I have due that week? And what are the deadlines happening? And what's my schedule? And how many calls do I have? And one thing about many female entrepreneurs is that you sacrifice just doing things in flow, and you probably run a military schedule. You're okay, kids get up at this time, feed the kids at this time, drop them off at this time, sit at my laptop, do this call, complete this task in here. Whether you're single, you're, with kids, whatever it may be, there's just a different level of intensity. But at the end of the day, you run your schedule on military mode. And as a result, you're constantly planning and problem solving. But ultimately, what you sacrifice in that process is you're sacrificing being spontaneous, which is the ability to say, I'm just going to pick up and go do X, or I'm just going to decide that I want to go do this thing today. And you can't necessarily always do that because there's things that are required commitments and responsibilities that are baked in that you have to manage and take care of. So there also, with spontaneity, oftentimes lacks simplicity. Because, for example, if I, want to just shut down for a week, let's say, some businesses, including mine, can't just step away and nobody notices. There's things that have to be handled. What does the team need from me? What do clients need from me? What does marketing need from me? There's these aspects of responsibility that are still there, regardless of whether I want to have this quick, spontaneous thing or not. It's not simple always to make moves in business. And it's not simple to make decisions because there's a domino effect. There's an aspect of complexity that is required to complete certain decisions. And most importantly, oftentimes our mental state is at complete capacity. Think about the last time that you never even thought about your business. You're didn't even cross my mind. There's probably not been a day or a week or a month where your business has not been in some capacity on your mind. And that in itself is the biggest thing I would say that I kind of miss about, I'm not going to lie, that I miss about a 9 to 5 is when I had a 9 to 5, I had the ability to literally clock out. I don't think about work until I come back the next day. It's not in my brain. I'm present and relaxing. I'm present in my stuff. I'm checked out. And you still, I want to be clear, can get that as an entrepreneur. It's just very difficult because even when you check out, you go, okay, what do I have to do on Monday? And what does my schedule look like? And what do I have to manage? And then also, did so-and-so get that deliverable? Did we handle that task? Your brain is just going. This is why in the middle of the night, you probably are sleeping and you wake up and you think of a marketing thing you want to do or a new offer you want to create, or you're in the shower and you're I have a really cool idea for a podcast. And you're wait a second, I'm showering, right? There's these moments where your brain is constantly consumed with business. And I think it's something that many of us don't recognize as a luxury in a way that we give up. We no longer have just this free mental space of I don't think or, worry or care about any of these things anymore. Our business is always on our brain. And lastly is financial. And this is something that I struggle with a lot because people around me will say then just don't have a team. just do it yourself. Like, just don't pay that person that much, or just don't have people that cost that. Find someone cheaper or whatever it may be. And there are and have been people in my circle who do not understand spending what I spend. So like if I spend on a brand shoot and I say, oh, it was this much, they're like, what? Because they don't see or understand what is required or the sacrifice that's required of investing in your business. I could totally have no team, no people, and, do everything with a system of some kind, pare back the business, keep all the money for myself. It's not like I'm not aware that that's an option. I'm fully aware that's an option. I don't want that option. And that's because that to me is not actually even a business. That's just me basically collecting cash to fund my lifestyle. So what I think about when I think about my business, my team, or expenses is like, I have to recognize that the business's money is not my money. So there's a sacrifice there in recognizing that, well, I could be like, okay, great. We got a $50,000 wire transfer from someone. Amazing. That's not my money. Like, that's not like, okay, Kate goes on a shopping spree now. This is like, hey, I'm sacrificing that. Yeah. Could I technically have that go to me? Sure. Number one, I would get assaulted in taxes. But second, it doesn't make any sense because that's not actually what I'm building. So I know people around me have always said, isn't that a lot of burden to like carry people's salaries, and the concern around that for you is, the concern of, well, like, do you have enough runway financially, and like always worrying about that. Yeah. Like my brain is always thinking and considering and working on, okay, like numbers all the time. And, investments that we're making, things that we're spending on. And oftentimes for most people in business, probably yourself as well, you have to stay 2 to 3 steps ahead at all times financially. You're looking at the runway and you're saying, okay, what do we have coming in? What do we have going out? What's the target of what we're going for? What are we working toward? What's our launch target, etc. So there is this constant capacity and managing that is required of you to oversee that and to handle that. And that, again, even itself, financially, there's a cost of you spending in things to grow your business, but there's also a cost of the financial burden of you, of the pressure, especially for any of you who are breadwinners. There's a very intense pressure that comes with, like, my financial success is the direct correlation of my family's stability. That's a lot of pressure for you to hold, whether you have kids or not. Even if you're just a couple and you're a breadwinner in that dynamic, it's still a lot for you to handle. It's still a lot for you to hold capacity for. And so I think as women, we just don't allow ourselves to recognize enough what ambition has asked of you. What has ambition asked of you? And it's going to stretch you, and it's going to expose you, and it's going to challenge you, and it's going to like rewrite you and who you knew you were. But I think that what I've recognized is, even with everything that we talked about today, I wouldn't change any of it. Truthfully, I wouldn't change any of it. Ambition and the desire to achieve massive things has caused me to need to sacrifice a lot. I've sacrificed money, I've sacrificed time, I've sacrificed relationships, I have sacrificed so many things, and I wouldn't change it because ultimately the only other option that I see is to know what was possible to achieve and never go for it because it required sacrifice in some way. And I'll speak for myself, I don't personally know that I could handle looking at myself in 10 years and saying, I'm not fit because I wasn't okay to sacrifice going to the gym when I didn't want to. I don't have the business I want because I wasn't willing to sacrifice the $3,000 for that contractor that could help me because I wanted to keep the money. I, don't have potentially the clients that you want because I wasn't willing to sacrifice the investment that was required to invest into marketing. So when I fast forward with anything I sacrifice, if I think, okay, if I didn't make this move right now and I didn't give up my time, give up my money, give up my energy, what would it look like? And the easiest example, and I know I always come back to this, but I'm just so incredibly inspired by moms, as you probably can tell. I think about it like this. Kids are one of the biggest responsibilities and probably one of the most intense jobs that anybody can have. Being a parent is an incredibly intense, strenuous, stretchy, exposing process. But any parent will tell you it is the most exhausting and the most amount of work, but it is also like the biggest blessing and the biggest gift in your entire life. And that perspective is how I think about us with ambition in every bucket. The thing that is actually exciting, the life that you want, the achievement that you see for yourself, the vision of what's possible for your life is going to require you to release things that are these preconceived, oh, that's a sacrifice to me. Yeah, that's what it takes. That's also why there's such a small section of society that does achieve the life they want. Think of how many people end up on their deathbed regretting things that they never went for. They regretted not, maybe they regret working too much and not prioritizing the relationship in the process of that, or spending more intentional time to find a balance between those. They regret not being at the kids' recital when they were younger because they feel like they missed out on that. There are regrets that people have because of what they sacrificed, when, and where. And so what I think about is, what is the life that you want? Like when you are fast forwarding to when you are 80 and when you're 90, what is the thing that is going to make you feel like I really did it? Like I really did what mattered. And I'll share with you what mine is. Mine is not financial. I want to be very clear. So I do not have my identity wrapped up in financial. Listen, as a salesperson, I love sales as much as the next person, but my identity is not wrapped up into money. What I actually really care about when I'm 90, the sacrifices are number one, health. I don't want to prematurely age or like age myself 20 years because I'm treating my body like crap. I really want to prioritize health to make sure that my body is good so it can hold me down for the long haul, okay? So I don't want to look back at 90 and be like, man, if I probably hadn't had as much sugar, if I probably had moved my body, I wouldn't be here. So that's like number one. Number two, relationship. One of the things that I really, for myself, I'm like, in this moment in time in my life, really bullish on is like, what are the relationships around me, friendships that I'm pouring into, relationship with my partner. It could even be spiritual relationship, if it's for myself, like a spiritual relationship with God or a faith relationship with God. For you, it might be something different. What are the relationships that when you get older, you're like, I really feel like I had so many great connections. I had so many great experiences and joys of people around me. The other thing for me is family, which is recognizing that like I know that having a family is going to be a lot of work. And I know that having a great relationship in correlation with being a mom is going to be a lot of work. Being a great mom is going to be a lot of work. But it's work that I want to do because when I think about the alternative of not having that, I can't fathom it for myself. This is just speaking for me, for myself. And so I recognize that every single thing that I want, the body I want is going to require me to go to the gym. The marriage I want is going to require me to do date nights when I don't feel like it sometimes, to feel like I have the hard conversation when I'm tired and I want to do it the next day. It's going to require those moments of sacrifice. The business is going to require me to sometimes do things and put in reps and put in work when I don't freaking want to, when I don't want to. But the only other opportunity, if you don't want to make that sacrifice, and this is what I tell people, is you have to choose consciously. This is my rule with all clients and even with myself now and with friends. The life you want is a byproduct of what you're doing right now. So one of the best things that my sister ever said is, show me your habits and I'll show you the life you'll have. And it really was about, if you tell me and show me what you're doing in your business right now, I will tell you the kind of business you're going to have in 3 years. If you tell me what you're doing in your relationship right now, I'll tell you how I would predict your relationship's probably going to evolve. So you can see this correlation between like cause and effect, meaning the things we sacrifice today, the habits that we put in, oftentimes when we don't want to, what that will produce for us. So I think it's important for us to recognize, number one, when you are ambitious, you're going to sacrifice things. So the complaining about like, oh, this is a lot of work, or this is inconvenient, or this is annoying. But that's also because you're choosing a different life. You're choosing an off-roading path that is not typical. So that's why it is a little bit bumpy, and that's because not a lot of people go down it. But the beautiful waterfall at the end just makes everything worth it. So that's why I want you to think about this pursuit of ambition. It isn't the common path. It isn't the easy way. It isn't the natural smooth highway that everybody's driving down. You're like, why does this feel bumpy? Why do I feel like it's not well lit? Why do I feel like I don't know where I'm going? It requires you to show up in a different way. It requires you to have a different perspective, a different pursuit, a different lens on how you see problems, all of it. And so what I want to say is, you are somebody right now that because you want so much for yourself, you are going to at moments feel that you are carrying this invisible weight. And in fact, based off everything we're talking about today, you are. So I want this to be the validation that maybe you've been needing right now, the conversation you've been needing, that the pressure you're feeling, the sacrifices that you've been experiencing, the reality that you've had is not something wrong with you, and is not that it should be easy, or I shouldn't have to have X, or this shouldn't have to be a sacrifice. It's about the fact that you want a very different and unique and big and bold and beautiful life. And sometimes, in order to be able to achieve these really big things, it's going to require you to show up in a very big way. And it means that there's going to be sacrifices in any bucket of your life that are required for you to achieve that thing. And so I wanted today to be really an opportunity for you to see yourself, frankly, for you to see what you're holding, see what you're navigating, see what you're managing, and just give yourself a moment right now to just give yourself a pat on the back. Because number one, you're doing it. You're here. You're listening to this. You're investing in yourself. You're wanting to learn about yourself. You're reflecting. You're doing the work. And so the invitation is just to show up for yourself as much as you are showing up for all of these different pieces around you, and to recognize what are the sacrifices that I am making, and ensure, most importantly, that you are choosing those consciously. So if I, for example, am going to, sacrifice my weekends to start a second business, I don't get to be resentful about that. I don't get to be angry about that, because it is my choice. I'm choosing it. On the contrast, if I do want the second business and I'm not willing to work evenings and weekends, that's fine. But I'm also choosing that the second business is not going to grow nearly at the rate that it could if I did work evenings and weekends. So remember, each way that you go, you are ultimately choosing something. So I would be curious today in listening, is there maybe something that you feel, as reflecting on this, what has been, in your opinion, one of your biggest sacrifices within your business? What's maybe been one of your biggest sacrifices within your life? And to just give yourself acknowledgement for that. Give yourself acknowledgement that you are sacrificing that, and that that is in the pursuit of something bigger. If there's something today that landed for you, maybe there's, something that I mentioned as a sacrifice of mine, or maybe of the list of all the things that I see that women are navigating, I really want to invite you to just share. I would love to hear what landed for you. Is there a sacrifice that you feel like you're like, man, I really never realized how much I sacrifice in X area? And if so, I want you to know my DMs, as always, are always open. I absolutely love hearing from you and all the shares and the stories of how things land for you. And so, of course, if I can support you in any way, you know where to find me. But with all that being said, I will see you on the next episode. And as always, stay ambitious.